The mine had been sealed since 1987, 37 years. County records confirmed it. State inspection tags still hung from the rusted chain across the entrance, dated and signed in blue ink that had faded to the color of old bruises. Juniper walked past the chain without stopping. She did not hesitate. She did not sniff. She walked into the dark the way she walked into rooms she had already been inside, with certainty that had no explanation. What Cole found 200 meters underground was not abandoned. Someone had been living there, and the calendar on the wall, every day crossed off in the same black ink, had its last mark on yesterday's date. Nobody had reported a missing person. Nobody had filed a claim on the mine. Nobody in the county office had any record of anyone entering this shaft in nearly 4 decades. But the bed was made, the lamp was warm, and the air smelled like coffee. If you have ever walked into a place and known, not suspected, known, that someone had just left, you already understand what Cole Merritt was feeling standing at the bottom of that shaft. Drop it in the comments. If you are new here, subscribe. We go to places like this every week. And turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Before we go any further, have you ever found a place that someone left behind and you could feel them still in it? Not a ghost, not a memory, a presence? Tell me about it in the comments. He was a man in his early to mid-50s, built tall and lean with the quiet economic movements of someone who has spent a lifetime working. His brown hair, grown a little too long, was streaked with silver at the temples. His face was weathered and rugged, carved by the sun and by memories that were just as harsh. Yet his eyes held a deep, settled kindness that had survived everything. He pulled on his boots, the leather cracked and dark with use. He shrugged into his old brown leather jacket and left it unzipped, revealing the dark flannel shirt beneath. Cole Merritt had been driving the back roads of Harlan County, Kentucky, since 4 in the morning. Sleep had not come. It had not come the night before either. Juniper sat in the passenger seat of the truck, her gray and white coat catching the first light through the windshield, her amber eyes fixed on the road ahead as if she were navigating and he were just the one holding the wheel. He had come to eastern Kentucky because a man he had served with, Ray Bowen, had died 11 days ago. Heart attack. 61 years old. They had not spoken in 9 years, and the last thing Ray had said to him was, "If anything happens to me, go to the mine. You'll understand when you get there." Cole had written it off. Ray had always been the kind of man who said things that sounded like they meant more than they did. The kind of man who left doors open on purpose just to see who would walk through. But Ray was dead now, and the words that had meant nothing for 9 years had started to weigh something. The mine was on a deed that had been in Ray's family for 3 generations. The Bowen Gold Mine. It had never produced gold in any meaningful quantity. A few ounces in the 1940s, enough to keep the family hopeful, never enough to keep them fed. The state had sealed it in 1987 after a partial collapse in the lower shaft. No fatalities, no lawsuits. Just a chain across the entrance and a signed inspection order that said, "Boom, not safe for entry." Cole had found the deed in a manila envelope that Ray's sister had mailed to him 4 days after the funeral. No letter, no explanation. Just the deed, a hand-drawn map of the shaft, and a single key on a piece of twine. The key was brass. It was not old. It had been cut recently. The teeth were still sharp, the metal still bright where it had not been handled. Juniper shifted in the seat beside him. She pressed her nose to the window glass, and her breath fogged a circle the size of a fist. She did that when she smelled something she could not yet place, building a picture, cataloging. He had watched her do it 1,000 times on 1,000 roads. He never got tired of it. He had 3 open questions and no answers. Why had Ray sent him the deed? What was the key for? And why had Ray's sister included no explanation? As if the objects were supposed to speak for themselves. The road climbed through a stand of bare oaks and then opened onto a ridge. Below him, the valley floor was covered in mist so thick it looked solid. Somewhere in that mist, according to the hand-drawn map, was the entrance to the Bowen Gold Mine. He pulled the truck over and sat for a long time looking at it. Juniper looked at the valley, Then she looked at Cole. Then she looked at the valley again. Her tail moved once. That was her way of saying, "We are going down there." He already knew that. He had not told anyone where he was going. He was not sure why. The road down to the mine was not a road. It was a logging track that had been abandoned long enough for the trees to start taking it back. Branches scraped both sides of the truck. The suspension hit every root and rock with a sound like someone knocking on a door that would not open. Juniper sat upright now. Her ears were forward. Her breathing had changed. Shorter, more deliberate. Not excitement, focus. The particular focus of an animal that has locked onto something the human beside it cannot yet perceive. He came around a bend and saw it. The mine entrance was cut into the side of a hill, a rectangular opening framed by timber that had gone gray and soft with decades of weather. The chain was still across it. The state inspection tags hung exactly as described in the county file. Two tags, one from a 1987, one from a follow-up in 1994. Both signed, both laminated, both hanging from a padlock that was rusted shut. But next to the padlock, on the left side of the chain, was a second lock. This one was not rusted. This one was brass, and it was open. Cole sat in the truck for a full minute. The engine ticked as it cooled. The mist was still heavy in the valley, and the mine entrance looked like a mouth that had been waiting to say something for 37 years. Juniper did not wait. She jumped out through the window he had left cracked, a space he would have said was too narrow for her, and walked to the mine entrance. She did not sniff the ground. She did not circle. She walked directly to the opening, sat down at the threshold, and looked back at him. He had seen her do that exactly twice before. Both times she had been right about what was inside. He stepped out. The air was cold and wet and tasted like iron. Not the iron of blood, the iron of rock, of water that had been filtering through mineral deposits for longer than anyone alive could remember. The timbers around the entrance were soft when he pressed his hand against them. Not rotten, just tired. The wood had absorbed so much moisture over the decades that it felt like pressing into a sponge. 3 decayed details hit him before he crossed the threshold. The first, a bird's nest built inside the upper corner of the entrance frame, abandoned, the twigs gray and brittle, collapsing under their own negligible weight when his shoulder brushed the timber. The second, the rail tracks leading into the darkness, still bolted to their ties, but the ties themselves had split lengthwise, the wood grains separating like pages of a book left open in the rain. The third, a piece of orange survey tape tied to the chain, so bleached by weather that it was nearly white, the knot still tight, but the fabric dissolving at the edges when he touched it. He looked at Juniper. She had not moved from the threshold. Her amber eyes caught what little light was left in the mist and held it. "All right," he said. He did not say it to her. He said it to himself. The moment he stepped past the chain, the temperature dropped. Not gradually. Immediately, the cold that came out of the mine was not outdoor cold. It was the cold of a sealed space, the kind that had been sitting undisturbed for decades and did not want to move. It pressed against his face and chest like a hand. Juniper walked in ahead of him. She did not look back. She moved along the left rail, her paws placed with the precision of an animal that understood the ground was not to be trusted. Her ears rotated independently, one forward, one to the side, mapping the space by sound. His flashlight cut a beam through air so thick with mineral dust that it looked like smoke. The tunnel was taller than he expected, 8 feet at least, the ceiling supported by timber cross beams spaced every 6 feet. Some of them had bowed under the weight of the mountain above. One had cracked in the middle and hung in 2 pieces, held together by nothing but friction and stubbornness. 40 meters in, he found the first minecart. It sat on the rails at an angle. One wheel had derailed, the front left corner digging into the gravel beside the track. The cart was empty. The metal was covered in a layer of rust so uniform it looked painted on. He ran his hand along the rim, and the rust came off on his fingers like powder, dry and orange, and fine as flour. Juniper stopped at the cart. She lowered her head and pressed her nose to the floor of the cart, not the rim, not the side, the floor, and held it there for 6 seconds. Then she looked up at Cole and moved on. He followed the rails deeper. The tunnel began to slope downward. The angle was gentle at first, maybe 5 degrees, but it steepened as he went. The ties under the rails were in better condition here, sheltered from weather. The air grew colder with every step. He could see his breath now, a gray cloud that the flashlight turned solid. At the 70-meter mark, he found the second cart. This one was different. It was not rusted. The metal was dull but intact, and inside it, folded neatly, was a wool blanket. Gray, military issue. The kind he had slept under for 3 years in places he did not talk about. He picked it up. It was dry. It smelled like nothing. Not mildew, not age, not soap, nothing. As if it had been placed there recently enough that it had not yet absorbed the mine. Juniper stood 10 feet ahead watching him. Her head was tilted exactly 4 inches to the left. It had always done that. He had no idea why. He put the blanket back. He kept walking. The rails went deeper. The tunnel narrowed to 6 feet wide. The cross beams above were closer together now, every 4 feet instead of 6, and some of them had been replaced. He could see it clearly. Older beams, gray and cracked, next to newer ones, still showing the pale yellow of fresh-cut pine. Someone had been maintaining this tunnel. He stopped. He put his hand on one of the new beams. The wood was smooth. Cut clean. No saw marks from an old mill. This was modern lumber, the kind you buy at a hardware store in 8-foot lengths. He pressed his thumbnail into it. The wood gave easily. Pine. Recent. Juniper had not moved. She stood at the edge of his flashlight beam, perfectly still, facing forward into darkness that the light could not reach. Her ears were flat, not fear. The particular adjustment of an animal that has decided a space requires more care than the last one. He followed the rails for another 60 meters. The tunnel curved to the left and then straightened. The slope increased. He could feel it in his knees now. The particular strain of walking downhill on an uneven surface, leaning back slightly to keep from gaining speed on the loose gravel between the ties. At the 100-meter mark, he found the junction. The main tunnel continued straight ahead, deeper into the mountain. But a second tunnel branched off to the right, narrower, the entrance framed by newer timber, the floor cleared of debris. Someone had cut this branch. Not in 1940, not in 1987. Recently. The saw cuts on the timber were clean and parallel. The sawdust in the corners had not yet turned gray. Juniper did not hesitate. She turned right. Cole stood at the junction for 11 seconds. He counted them. It was a habit from the service. When you do not know which way to go, count to 10. If you still do not know at 10, go the way the dog went. He had learned that from a handler in Helmand Province in 2004, a man named Vasquez, who had trusted his dog more than any map, any briefing, any satellite image. Vasquez had been right every time. He had also been killed by a thing no dog could have smelled. Cole did not think about that now. He thought about it later. He always thought about it later. He followed Juniper into the branch tunnel. The walls here were closer. He could touch both sides by extending his arms. The ceiling was lower, empty, 6 feet, maybe less. He ducked instinctively, the leather of his jacket creaking at the shoulders. A habit from 20 years of door frames that were built for smaller men. The air changed. It was not just cold now, it was still. Absolutely still. Not the still of a room, the still of a place that had been holding its breath. The smell hit him without warning. Concrete dust and diesel, not from the mine, from somewhere 30 years behind him. The tunnel disappeared. He was in the basement of a barracks in Bagram, November 2003. The lights out, the generator dead, the air thick with pulverized dust from the blast that had taken the east wall 20 minutes earlier. Vasquez was beside him. The TDMO, a Belgian Malinois named Six, was pressed flat against the floor, ears pinned, breathing in quick, shallow pulls. Vasquez had his hand on the dog's flank. He said one word, "Wait." They waited for 41 minutes. Nobody came. Nobody needed to. The building held. The dust settled. Six stood up first. Vasquez stood up second. Cole stood up last. He had always stood up last. Juniper pressed her nose into his palm. He was back. He was in the mine. The tunnel was ahead. He kept walking. Juniper moved ahead at a steady pace. Her nails clicked on the rock floor. The ties had ended here, replaced by bare stone that had been chipped smooth by hand. He could see the tool marks, short, angled strikes, the kind made by a handpick, not a machine. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. Someone had carved this passage by hand, one strike at a time, over months or years. At the 140-meter mark, he was counting paces now, each pace roughly a meter. He smelled something. Not mineral, not rock dust. Coffee. Fresh coffee. He stopped. Juniper stopped. She turned her head and looked at him. Not a question, an acknowledgement. She had smelled it before he did. She had been walking toward it for the last 40 meters. The tunnel widened into a chamber. He could feel the space open up around him before his flashlight confirmed it. The echo of his footsteps changed. The air pressure shifted, and the temperature rose by at least 5 degrees. He swept the beam across the chamber, and his hand stopped moving. It was a room. Not a cave, not a mining chamber. A room. 12 feet by 15, roughly rectangular, the walls smoothed and covered with, he stepped closer, plywood panels, painted white. The paint was not fresh, but it was not old either. 2 years, maybe 3. The floor was poured concrete, rough but level, the kind of pour done by one person with a wheelbarrow and no forms. There was a steel frame bed against the far wall, neatly made, the blanket folded with military precision. Hospital corners, the top edge exactly 6 inches below the pillow. A desk, a chair, a lamp, a battery-powered LED lantern, the kind you find at any camping store, still glowing on its lowest setting. Someone had been here minutes ago. Not hours. Minutes. Juniper walked into the room without caution. She went directly to the bed, pressed her nose into the blanket, and then lay down beside it. She put her head on her paws and exhaled. One long, slow breath. Cole had never seen her do that in a strange place. She did that at home. She did that in places she considered safe. He stood in the doorway and cataloged the room the way he had been trained to catalog any space. Threats first, exits second, details third. No threats visible. One exit. The tunnel he had come through. Details, a small propane stove on a metal shelf bolted to the wall, a single pot, a single cup, a single plate. All clean. A 5-gallon water jug, 3/4 full. A stack of books, he counted them. 14, held between 2 bricks used as bookends. A flashlight, a radio, unplugged, the antenna extended. And on the wall above the desk, taped with 4 strips of masking tape, a calendar. The calendar was from the current year. Every day had been crossed off in black ink. Small, precise X marks. Uniform. The same pen, the same pressure, the same person every single day. The last mark was on yesterday's date. Today's square was empty. He stepped closer. His boot hit something on the floor, a pen, black ink. The cap was off. It had rolled to a stop against the leg of the desk, as if someone had dropped it in a hurry. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed in that room? Or would you have turned around and never come back? He did not have an answer for that either. He stayed. He opened the desk drawer. Inside, a notebook. Spiral-bound, college-ruled. The cover was plain black. He opened it. The handwriting was small, precise, and even. The handwriting of someone who had been trained to write in tight spaces. Military. He recognized it the way he recognized the hospital corners on the bed. These were habits that did not leave. The first entry was dated 14 months ago. Day 1 arrived, shaft in better condition than expected, East Branch passable to 140 meters. Will need to reinforce the junction. Brought enough lumber for 3 months. Will reassess. He turned the pages. The entries were daily, short, factual, no emotion, no names, no explanation of why. Day 12, poured floor, rough but level. Dog came to the entrance again today, gray and white, did not enter. Cole stopped reading. He looked at Juniper. She was still lying by the bed. Her amber eyes were open, watching him. He read the entry again. Dog came to the entrance again today. Gray and white, did not enter. Juniper had never been to Kentucky before this trip. He was certain of that. He had driven her here himself, 11 hours from Tennessee. She had been in his truck the entire time. She had never left his sight, but the notebook said, again. He turned more pages. Day 23, dog at the entrance, third time, sits at the threshold, does not come inside, looks like it belongs to someone, no collar. Day 41, reinforced junction beam, dog was here when I came up for lumber, watched me work for 2 hours, left before dark. Day 58, name the day you go, not mine to name, but it helps. Calling it uni, gray and white, amber eyes, calm the way only trained dogs are calm. Cole closed the notebook. He set it back in the drawer. He sat down in the chair, and he did not move for a long time. Juniper was not beside him. He turned. She was gone. The room was empty except for him. He looked at the tunnel entrance. Dark. He listened. No sound, no click of nails on stone. Nothing. He stood. Juniper. His voice echoed once and died. The LED lantern flickered, not a malfunction, just the slight pulse of a battery that was near its end. He picked up his flashlight and aimed it into the tunnel. The beam traveled 40 feet and stopped against a curve in the rock. He waited. He counted to 30. At 22, he heard her. One click, then another. She came around the curve carrying something in her mouth, gently the way she carried things that were not hers. She walked to him and set it at his feet. A photograph, laminated. The lamination was cloudy with age, but the image was visible. Two men in desert fatigues, standing in front of a concrete barrier wall, squinting into hard light. One of them was Ray Bowen, young, maybe 25. The other man, Cole leaned down and picked up the photograph. The other man was someone he did not recognize, but the name tape on his chest was readable. Merritt, not Cole Merritt. The name tape read J. Merritt. His father's name was James Merritt. His father had died when Cole was 7 years old. Heart failure, his mother had said. Served overseas, came back different, died young. That was the entire story he had been given. He had never seen a photograph of his father in uniform. His mother had kept none. She had said there were none. Juniper sat beside him. She pressed her side against his leg, the way she did when the ground was not steady. He did not reach down to touch her. His hands were not steady enough for that. He sat in the chair in that underground room for 19 minutes. He knew because he counted. It was the only thing he could do that made sense. The photograph lay on the desk in front of him. Ray Bowen and James Merritt, side by side. The concrete barrier behind them was the kind used at forward operating bases. T-walls, they called them. The light was desert light, hard and white and flat. The shadows fell short, which meant midday. Both men were squinting. Both men were smiling. Not the smile of a photograph. The smile of two men who had forgotten the camera was there. Juniper lay at his feet. She had not moved since she brought the photograph. Her breathing was slow and even. She was not asleep. She was waiting the way she waited when she understood that something was happening that required her to be still. He opened the notebook again. He turned past the entries he had already read. The handwriting did not change. Small, precise, consistent. The entries grew longer as the months passed. Day 74, East Branch now habitable. Insulated walls, floor sealed, brought the last of the supplies down today. 12 trips total. Each trip takes 41 minutes down and 53 minutes up. The grade is steeper than it looks. Day 89, found the second shaft today. Behind the east wall, not on any map, hand-cut, narrow, shoulder width, goes down at least another 50 meters. Did not explore, not yet. Day 103, the dog was here again, Junie, sat at the main entrance for 3 hours, did not come past the chain. I left water. It was gone when I came back up. Cole turned more pages. The entries shifted, still factual, but something underneath had changed, a weight that had not been there before. Day 112. Went into the second shaft today. 47 meters down, found a sealed door. Steel, set into the rock. Padlock, old, but not rusted. The shaft is ventilated. Air moves. Someone designed this. Day 118. Open the door. The key from the envelope fits. Inside a room. Smaller than mine. 8 by 10. Concrete floor. Steel shelving along 3 walls. On the shelves, file boxes, 11 of them, labeled by year, 1969 through 1979. Day 119, opened the first box, 1969, service records, deployment orders, medical files, photographs, all for the same unit. 14 men, one of them, J. Merritt. Cole stopped breathing. He did not realize he had stopped until Juniper pressed her nose into his hand. Not a nudge, a correction. He inhaled. The air tasted like concrete and lamp oil and something underneath that he recognized from field medicine and tried not to name. He kept reading. Day 121. The files are complete. Every deployment, every action report, every medical evaluation. J. Merritt was part of a unit that operated in Laos between 1969 and 1972. Officially, no American military personnel were in Laos during that period. These files prove otherwise. 14 men, 3 did not come back. J. Merritt came back. He came back different. Day 130. I am the last one who knows. Ray Bowen told me before he died, the files were moved here in 1979 by the unit commander. He sealed them underground because he believed they would be destroyed if they stayed in any official facility. He was probably right. The men in those files were never acknowledged. Their service was erased. Their injuries were attributed to training accidents. Their deaths were listed as natural causes. Cole set the notebook down. He pressed his palms flat on the desk. The surface was cold. The concrete walls were cold. Everything in this room was cold, except the dog at his feet and the truth in the notebook. His father had not died of heart failure. Or rather, he had. But the heart failure had a cause, and the cause had a name. And the name was in a file box 11 years deep in a sealed room at the bottom of a shaft that no map had ever recorded. He stood. Juniper stood with him. He picked up the flashlight and walked out of the room and into the branch tunnel. Juniper walked ahead. Her pace was steady. Not fast, not cautious. The pace of an animal that knew exactly where it was going. The second shaft was where the notebook said it would be, behind what looked like a solid wall in the east branch. But when he ran his hand along the seam, he found the gap. A panel. Plywood over a timber frame, fitted flush to the rock. He pulled it open. The hinges were oiled. The panel moved without sound. The shaft behind it was narrow. He turned sideways. Juniper went first, her body low, her shoulders brushing both walls. The angle was steep, 30 degrees at least. His boots slipped on the bare rock. He braced himself with one hand on the wall and felt the chisel marks under his fingers. Thousands of them. This shaft had been cut by hand, the same way the branch tunnel had been cut. One strike at a time, one man, over years. At the bottom, 47 meters, just as the notebook said, was the door. Steel, set into a timber frame that had been mortared into the rock. The padlock was open, hanging from the hasp. The key was still in it. The key on the twine. The key from the manila envelope. The key that Ray's sister had mailed without explanation. He pushed the door open. The air that came out was different. Not mine air, climate-controlled air. Someone had installed a ventilation system. He could hear it now, a low electrical hum from somewhere deeper in the rock. A fan. Running on a power source he could not see. The room was exactly as described. 8 by 10, concrete floor, steel shelving on 3 walls, 11 file boxes, labeled 1969, 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973, 1974, 1975, 1977, 1978, 1979. Juniper entered the room and sat in the center of the floor. She faced the shelves as if she were guarding them. Her ears were up. Her eyes moved across the boxes the way eyes move across a horizon, scanning, not focusing. She had never been trained for document work. She was doing this on her own. He pulled the box labeled 1969. It was heavy, heavier than paper should be. The weight of it settled into his arms like something alive. He set it on the floor, and the sound it made on the concrete was solid, final. The sound of something arriving at the place it had always been meant to reach. He lifted the lid. Inside, manila folders. 23 of them. Each one labeled with a name and a service number written in the same precise military hand. The labels were typed on a manual typewriter. He could see the slight unevenness of the strike, the way the E sat a fraction higher than the other letters. He went through them one by one. Anderson, B.R. Caldwell, D.J. Espinoza, M.T. The names meant nothing to him. Then, Merritt, James A. The folder was thicker than the others. He opened it. The photograph on the first page was his father. Young, maybe 22. The face Cole remembered only from a single photograph his mother had kept in a drawer. Not displayed, kept. Hidden is what it was. The photograph in the file matched. Same man, same eyes. The eyes that Cole saw in the mirror every morning. The service record was complete. Enlistment date, training dates, deployment dates. The deployment was to a location identified only by a grid coordinate. No country name, no base name, just numbers. But the grid coordinate, when Cole read it, placed his father in northern Laos. In 1969, 2 years before the American public was told that operations in Laos existed. The medical file was thick, 47 pages. He did not read all of them. He did not need to. The summary on the final page was enough. Subject exposed to experimental defoliant compound during operations in grid zone, redacted. Compound later identified as Agent Orange variant with additional chemical markers not present in standard formulation. Subject presented with cardiac symptoms beginning 1974. Prognosis, degenerative. No treatment protocol available. Subject advised to seek civilian medical care under alternative diagnosis. Recommended civilian diagnosis, idiopathic cardiomyopathy. His father had not died of heart failure. His father had been poisoned. And the people who poisoned him had written the instructions for how to lie about it. Juniper was beside him. He had not felt her move. She was pressed against his leg, her head tilted up, her amber eyes on his face. He looked down at her, and something cracked inside him that had been holding for 43 years. Not loud, not dramatic. The sound a frozen lake makes in March when the first warm day arrives and the ice that looked permanent begins to shift. He sat on the floor of that room with the file in his hands and the doig against his side, and he did not make a sound. He did not need to. The room was 200 meters underground. No one could hear him. No one had heard his father either. He had spent 3 years trying to find the kind of courage that does not require action, the kind that just requires staying. Staying in one place when everything says move. Staying with the truth when everything says forget. The people who had built this room, Ray, the unit commander, whoever had carried these boxes down 200 meters of hand-cut shaft and sealed them behind a steel door, they had that kind of courage. They had it in abundance, and they had left it here for whoever came after. He was whoever came after. He went through every box. It took 4 hours. Juniper did not leave the room. She moved from the center to a position beside the door, lying with her head up, watching the shaft. Standing guard the way she stood guard at home when he was doing something that mattered, and she had decided her job was to make sure no one interrupted. 14 men, 3 killed in action, listed officially as training deaths at domestic installations. 4 who developed cancers attributed to unknown environmental factors. 2 who went missing after discharge, no follow-up, no investigation, files closed. 3 who survived but were denied veterans benefits because their deployment officially never happened. And James Merritt, cardiac death at 34, diagnosed as idiopathic, meaning we do not know the cause. Except they did know the cause. They had written it down. They had filed it, and then they had buried the file. The last box, 1979, contained one additional item, not a file, a letter, handwritten, addressed to no one. If you are reading this, then Ray kept his word. These files exist because 14 men served and their service was erased. I could not prevent that. I could prevent the erasure from being permanent. This is not justice. Justice requires living men in positions of authority who are willing to act. This is memory. Memory does not require permission. The letter was unsigned. The handwriting was not Ray's. Cole had seen Ray's handwriting on the map. This was someone else. The unit commander, maybe, or one of the 3 survivors. He would never know. The letter did not ask to be attributed, it asked to be found. He carried 2 boxes up the shaft. The 1969 box, his father's year, and the 1979 box with the letter. He left the rest. He would come back for them. He did not know when. The climb took 53 minutes. The notebook had been exact. Juniper walked behind him this time, not ahead. She had never done that before. She kept her nose near his heel, close enough that he could feel her breath on the back of his boot. She was spotting him, the way a spotter stands behind a man lifting more than he should. He emerged from the mine into late afternoon light. The mist had burned off. The valley was green and sharp and impossibly bright after 6 hours underground. He stood at the entrance and blinked, and for a moment he could not remember what season it was. He set the boxes in the bed of the truck. He did not cover them. He wanted them in the open air. 45 years underground was enough. Juniper jumped into the passenger seat through the open door. She sat exactly as she had sat that morning, upright, eyes forward, ready. But she turned her head once and looked back at the mine entrance. One look, long. Then she faced forward again. He drove the logging track back to the county road. The branches scraped the truck the same way they had that morning. The road was the same, the trees were the same, he was not. He did not drive to the county office. He did not drive to a lawyer. He did not drive to the VA. He drove to a motel in the nearest town, and he sat on the bed with the box open in front of him, and he read his father's file from the first page to the last. Every word, every date, every redacted grid coordinate, and every recommended civilian diagnosis designed to ensure that no one ever connected a dead veteran to the government that killed him. Juniper lay on the floor beside the bed. She did not sleep. He knew because every time he turned a page, her ears moved. She was listening to the paper. Or she was listening to him. He was not sure it mattered which. He finished at 11 at night. He closed the file. He put it back in the box. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall, and he thought about his mother. She had kept one photograph. One. In a drawer, not on a wall, not on a shelf, in a drawer. He had asked her once, he was 9, why there were no pictures of his father in the house. She had said, because looking at pictures of someone you can't explain is worse than not looking at all. He had not understood that then. He understood it now. She had known. Not everything, not the files, not the compound, not the grid coordinates. But she had known the story she was told was not the real story. And she had spent 30 years carrying that knowledge alone because no one had given her the evidence to turn it into something she could say out loud. The dog walked a half step ahead, the way it always had. Nobody said anything for a long time. Nobody needed to. He would take the files to a veterans advocacy lawyer in Nashville. He knew one, a woman who had spent 11 years fighting for declassification of service records. She would know what to do with 11 boxes. She would know how to give 14 men their names back. But that was tomorrow. Tonight he sat in a motel room in Harlan County with a file box and a bomb and the first clear understanding of his father he had ever been given. It was not a happy understanding. It was not a comforting one. It was the truth. And the truth, even when it comes 43 years late, even when it comes from a sealed room at the bottom of a mine shaft that no map records, the truth still changes the shape of everything that came before it. Some things don't need a ceremony. They just need someone to come and find them. He never found out who wrote the unsigned letter. He thought about it every day for the rest of his life. He never stopped thinking about it. Some doors you open and walk through and never close again. Juniper put her head on his knee. He put his hand on her head. They sat like that until the light in the motel room turned gray with morning.